Pete, you've mentioned about detection technologies that Clearview do. Can you delve a bit more into that?
Yeah, it's kind of a big subject, so it's another one where you get
I'll
yourself
sit
a
back
drink.
and relax.
So a long time ago, I talked about Clearview. Originally, our first foray into this market was, we were called Golden River at the time, and we made loop-based traffic counters. A loop-based traffic counter is, as the name suggests, it's basically just a loop in the road, and this is a loop-based traffic counter. This is what we call Connex traffic. So this loop sits in the road, and it's I often say it's very much like a metal detector. You've seen people kind of walking along the beach, with their metal detector, scanning it side to side, looking for bits of metal. So what they've got at the end of that is a loop. The little plate at the end of that metal detector is a loop, and they're scanning that loop over the ground, looking for golden doubloons or whatever it is they're looking for. Our traffic counters are almost like the opposite. So it's almost like we're burying the metal detector in the ground, and the things we're detecting flow over the top of it. So instead of the metal detector sweeping looking for metal, our device sits there fixed in the road, and the metal goes over the top of it, and the metal being the cars.
Yeah.
So we tend to have two loops. And because we've got two loops, we know which one the vehicle got to first, and then we know which one it got to second. So that tells us which direction it's travelling in. We know how far apart the loops are, so that allows us to know how quickly the vehicle's travelling. So there's a lot of information we can get just from those two loops. But as a vehicle passes over it, a vehicle generates what we call a magnetic signature. So it's not just on or off. You get like a little bit of a signal, and a bit of a peak, and then another. So if you look at it, it's kind of like a graph. And some of our products have effectively what we used to call machine learning is now called AI. So the Connex unit has AI built into it that enables it to, we effectively train it to recognize particular signatures of vehicles. So we can look at the length, but we can also see there's a big chunk of metal at the front, or there's a big chunk of metal at the back. Well, if the big chunk of metal at the back and it's a certain length, the likelihood is it's a bus, because buses have their engines at the back, and that's a big chunk of metal.
Yeah,
so you see on the trace effectively that you see the front of the vehicle, and then there's a big lump at the back. That's the engine. That's a bus. Put the engine at the front, it might be the same length, but it might be an HGV, because the engine is at the front of an HGV. You can also detect things like the level of the floor. Buses tend to have very low floors. Trucks tend to have a fairly high floor. So all of that stuff gives the ability for the machine learning, the intelligence in the device, to actually work out more than you could get just from looking at that vehicle was so many meters long. We can say so many meters long, and it's probably got axles here, and it's got an engine there, and so the floor is this high. So that enables us to get quite high levels of accuracy. Typically, a loop-based counter can get at least eight classes of vehicles, but we've got some that are Swiss 10, for instance. It's 10 classes, and in Switzerland we had to train the device very specifically to look for particular types of vehicles. They have they have an unusual mix of vehicles, because in the summer they tend to have HGVs that have a trailer. In the winter, they have this kind of shortened version of an HGV that doesn't have a trailer because there's so much snow on the road. But it's actually quite difficult to make some of the vehicles look very similar when they've got the trailer and when they haven't and stuff. So we had to train the system specifically to identify those things. Which reminds me, we do sell these products internationally. We have international partners all around the world that kind of sell our products as well. So that's one of the detection technologies. Sticking with Connex, there's another version of Connex we call Connex Active. It uses this same purple box, but it connects to LiDAR sensors. LiDAR is basically radar, but using light. And basically the unit fires out a beam of laser light and detects how long it takes to bounce it back. So we keep firing these beams, and we get a bounce back.
Yeah.
Depending on how far away that is, we can tell how far away the thing was, whether it's a pedestrian or whether it's a cyclist. So Connex Active is all about active travel users, so it's pedestrians and cyclists basically. And we're firing this beam across, and you effectively can get a trace from this thing that's interrupted the beam. and the computer, the algorithm in here can work out, was that a cyclist or was that a pedestrian?
Yeah.
And it can do it with very high levels of accuracy. I think we can count something like 98% accurate and classify it to about 95% accuracy. That's actually really very high when you consider people might be walking along, they're carrying shopping bags or pushing a wheelchair and all sorts of stuff. When you think this thing is just little beams of light and it's kind of working out what that thing is, it's actually really quite impressive. So that's loops, LiDAR.
Yep.
Should mention perhaps in the Connex unit, there's also a thing called a PLC, programmable logic controller. We can make that PLC look for certain things and make decisions based on what it's seen. I talked ages ago about the scheme that we did on Stone Ferry Road where we're looking for cyclists. The PLC can be programmed to say, when you detect a cyclist, close this contact. When you close that contact, we can then do something with it. On Stone Ferry Road, for instance, we flash the studs. It might be that you'll open a barrier or illuminate a sign or whatever. The PLC, though, can actually make decisions. So we've talked previously about road safety solutions.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, if there's an HGV about to emerge from a side turning and there's a vehicle approaching that's doing over a certain speed, the PLC can go, yes, there's an HGV. Yes, there's a vehicle doing over 60 miles an hour. Therefore, I'll do this. So if this and that, but not that, then do this. So this contact closure system, this PLC, can actually be used in a whole range of different solutions. So we talked about loops, we talked about LiDAR.
Yeah.
Probably the significant one and the latest technology is video.
Of course, yeah.
We used to call it Insight Vision. We now call it Connex Vision. So this is a video-based, it's a camera. Effectively, the camera is plugged into a device which has basically a mini PC in there. And that PC is doing video analytics. So it's analysing what it's seeing and in real time working out what it is. So is that a pedestrian? Is that a car? Is that a bus? Is that an HGV? Is it an articulated HGV? And basically the data that comes out of it looks identical to the data that comes out of here. So that's why we're calling it now Connex Vision.
Yeah.
So effectively, as far as if you were kind of looking at the end of the cable, you wouldn't know whether it was this purple box or whether it's a camera that's generating that data. It looks the same.
Yeah.
The difference is with Connex Vision is you don't have to install anything in the road, so you're not have to.
No hardware for it.
There's a hardware on the street light, for instance, but we're not invasively putting loops in the ground or whatever. Interestingly, Vision is almost a combination of the standard Connex unit and the Connex Active, because the Vision unit can see pedestrians and see cyclists and see cars and vans. A loop-based counter can't see a pedestrian. Yeah. They're not metal. So a metal detector, I could wave it over you, and unless you've got your big gold chain around your neck, it won't detect you.
On to this.
No, I noticed, yeah. So a loop won't detect a pedestrian, but the Connex Vision unit will detect a pedestrian. So it's more of a multimodal solution. People that often get a bit worried when you're talking about using vision in an urban environment that, people are being watched, I don't want to be seen by a camera. Part of the solution is that the camera will identify you as a pedestrian, but then blurs you out. So I can see you're a pedestrian, but there's no reason for somebody else to see that. So the camera goes, let me draw a box around you, let me say you're a pedestrian, let me count you, but I'm going to blur you out. So all I can see if I'm viewing the stream is this blurred image walking past. So Insight Vision, for kind of GDPR kind of privacy reasons, can blur out people's faces. It can blur out people, it will blur out cyclists, and it can also blur out vehicle registration numbers. Yep. It's optional, you don't have to, but it's something the unit can do. Final bit, I told you it was going to be a long one. I talked about the PLC within the Connex unit, this programmable logic controller, this contact closure thing. To mimic effectively what we can do with this, we can do the same thing now with a Connex Vision unit. So the Vision unit can be looking at an environment and actually can trigger those contacts when it sees a thing. That thing might be, for instance, a bus. So if it sees a bus coming along, it may open a barrier or drop a bollard or something. But equally, it can do things like, if it sees a pedestrian where there shouldn't be a pedestrian, it can raise an alert. So we've got a particular site where we're monitoring the number of people crossing a pedestrian crossing.
Yeah.
And as long as the pedestrians are on that crossing, we're just counting them crossing the road. And we're also counting all the vehicles going up and down the road, and we're counting the pedestrians going up and down on the pavement. But if a pedestrian crosses not on the pedestrian crossing, we can raise an alert. And that can actually be useful for the local authority to understand why are people not using the crossing, what circumstances, how many people are doing that, is that a safety hazard, and so on. But we can also measure things like vehicles where there shouldn't be vehicles. So if vehicles drive on the pavement, we can raise an alert. If a vehicle stops, we can raise an alert. If a vehicle's going in the wrong direction, we can raise an alert. So from this single unit, we can do all of the count and classification stuff, but we can also use it potentially as a basis for a safety system, detecting stopped vehicles, wrong way travelling vehicles, pedestrians where there shouldn't be pedestrians, and so on. And that's all part of this kind of contact closure system that's basically mimicking what we've had for a long time on the Connex traffic unit, but actually using it now in the Connex Vision or the Insight Vision unit. So that's kind of the key technologies that we use. I've also mentioned things like environmental sensors, road condition monitors and stuff. We've also integrated a number of third-party radar units. Radar is good in certain circumstances. It doesn't tend to be very good at lots of classes. So with a radar, typically you might get 4 classes. So you'll get small things and big things pretty much. So you won't be able to work out, is it an HGV or an articulated HGV, for instance, but you'll know it's a big vehicle, and you'll know it's kind of a car, or maybe it's a light goods vehicle. So it tends to be a little bit more vague, but we've integrated quite a few different manufacturers' radar units. So we can do loops, LiDAR, radar, vision. Those are probably the main detection technologies, and then you've got the kind of environmental sensors, the pollution monitors, stuff like that, which are also integrated into the Insight platform.
What don't we do realistically?
Whatever you want us to connect. And that, I mean, being a bit cheeky, but if there's something that somebody wanted to be integrated into the platform, it's our platform. We have our own software engineers, we have our own hardware engineers. If we need to integrate something, we can. So a lot of these things are often driven by projects that often we've integrated a pollution center because a particular customer wanted it. So just because we don't do something today doesn't mean we can't. By all means do have a conversation with us, because we've got our own software development engineers, and they love a challenge. So if we need to integrate some other device, then we can do that as well.
Perfect explanation as always, Pete. It's an absolute pleasure having you on.
All right, mate. Nice to see you again.
See you soon.
All right.